Good afternoon, evening, morning, whatever it is, and welcome to Nature Echoes on this very wet and windy Wednesday, 27th of September 2023. So, any of you in Ireland that are watching this, congratulations for still having your power and internet on. So, thank you for joining me. It's our weekly time for echoing news, stories, poetry, and art connected to nature folklore and our precious water, holy wells, the woodlands, hedges, and wildlife. So, hail, hail, hole. It feels like hail in some places, but a holy good health to you all, and thank you again for joining. And as you saw from the picture earlier, this is all about the origins of women and fairies, and hopefully some links for you to be able to take this a lot further. And the latest that's happening with my Owen Prompts course, which used to be the Journaling Nature Folklore, and other news I've got really well put on Substack, really. So this Nature Echoes Live, plus the growing nature folklore video articles, the photo library, and the Owen Prompts course now, the modules. If you go here, I'm going to try something because I haven't got the direct link to Substack. So let's try something else. There's a link. I got my old link back again. It's really because there we go, somewhere along there, because my previous Substack address, it got lost in my configuration. So let me take you through this a bit. So if you go to naturefolklore.com, which is there, and that's where you go. This is a new thing for me to take you through. You go there and you click the what do you click? Publications. Go through the publications. There you go there, and if you click the reads there, and then you get various articles. And if you go through to any of the articles, that's the Ale Housewives, the latest thing. You'll find. I obviously I'm subscribed because that's me. You'll see the subscribe button, and you can go through it like that. Anyway, that's a wee bit of demonstration on that. Now, trying to do being very sophisticated with you, I'm now losing my way. So let's get back to you now and get off the screen for a little while. And I'm back. So that was a little demo of how to do that through the Nature Folklore, and you could subscribe to my Substack. There's a free subscription offer. You get access to at least 40 informative Nature Folklore articles. And if you upgrade to become a support subscriber, that includes my OM course, the OM Prompts. It's a 20 course modules a year. Join at any time. It's a revolving course. It's not a linear course. I'll be adding stuff to it each year as well. So you get the latest updates added to the module from the year before. And you can join in any of the seasonal online live workshops that I believe I'll get going next year. I've been so busy putting the content up this year. It'll be a bit leaner tomorrow, so that's great. As I say, it didn't really come up there, did it? Well, I'm going to go through this again. Let's put this back on the stage. I want to show you something else from the links here, if I haven't screwed it up. There we go. If we go to the course there, that tells you there, the on prompts. It says €5 a month or €30 a year. That's one of the links if you go to naturefolklore.com. So have a go at that and try the links. I'd love to see you joining if you can. So let's get that back off the screen again. Enough of that. That's the pleasure. This is really what keeps your support, especially for the course, is what helps to pay for all this going on, the broadcasting, and keep this live. So that's the show survival pledge sorted for now. Let's see, there's some early birds have come along, and I actually took the time, a little bit of time, to put this up on YouTube. And look what we got people in from YouTube, which is fabulous. We got people in from YouTube this time, and I don't think in from the Facebook. So there we go. Runa, lovely. Hello, dear sir. Wonderful to hear about the good folk today from you live. Very good. And Runa's from Romania. Look at that. A place of merry fairy mounds. So I've heard. Visit one day, because it looks like as if it a beautiful country, and there's such a lot they talk about with the nature folklore in relation to how the cultures from the Balkans and through Eastern Europe up to the Slavs, how it moved across to here. So very important, and one day we'll get there. So thanks for being on board and watching this. Fabulous. And anybody else that'd like to say hello, make comments, do not, of course, do not hesitate to do so. Right. Origins of women. That's my first echo. Much of this echo is actually, I'm going to be quoting in and out my own stuff mixed with the stuff from Martini Fisher, a lovely writer. And in Ancient Origins, she had a recent article called Where Did Women Came From? And Martini is very popular. Her time maps series of books. So this is one of them. This is Where the Women Came From. It's really a time map, but her books are fascinating. So where did the first women of ancient creation come from? Well, certainly not from Adam, as he would have needed to come out of a womb somewhere himself. And according to the Bible's Genesis, let's start getting pictures up. I've got a lot of pictures today, so I hope I can get them up for you. No, don't say I've knocked the pictures off. Let's get the slides going for you. I've messed up something. Here we go. We'll get it back on the stage. Let's go there. And right, we're in order. There we go. According to the Bible's book of Genesis, Adam was a man who was placed in the Garden of Eden to tend to the garden and animals. And by the looks of that picture, he was a damn good hairdresser as well. And so how did he become called Adam? I gather Adamah in Hebrew, something like that. Hebrew people will be able to correct me on pronunciation there. But that his name there, artist impression there, describing that he is made, or its description is of red earth or clay. Though some interpreters who may have watched too much television suggest that Adam means the earth of blood. And I suppose if he was made from dust and blood running through his veins, perhaps there's some accuracy to that. But within this land that's called Eden, back to some pictures here, lovely artist impression there. It's expected, seems the favorite is somewhere, the Eden is somewhere in Mesopotamia. Some are even more direct, saying in northwest Iran. It's all around a tree there, containing the knowledge of good and evil. And as you know from Nature Echoes and Nature Folklore, I'm not very good at handling the evil word. I don't believe in evil itself. I think we have other ways of dealing with it. Yes, people do nasty things to nasty people, but I'm not going to go through that on this Echoes. So I'd rather say it's the definition, rather than good and evil, let's say light and dark. And that's what we're balancing out. And Adam was instructed never to eat the tree's fruit. I think we all know that. And as you follow the Adam story in the Bible, the narrative seems to follow that wisdom is obtained through man's disobedience that's initiated by women. There's a bit of a debate on that as well, isn't there? So through some indigenous cultures around the world to compare with this biblical, I'm losing my voice early. I've only got in a couple of minutes, especially written within the Americas. Perhaps their indigenous people are a lot more sensible, and I think a lot of people might agree with that one. The women was actually, we were all burned from her, but then again, who was the first woman? There's an artist's impression. I try and avoid AI. I mean, it's very difficult to actually find pictures to talk about ancient things without coming across an AI picture. I hope that is an artist's impression. I'm still trying to find illustrations and vintage, vintage drawings and photographs that are kind of free to the public, but I think the AI stuff is starting to take over. So sorry if it is. I would prefer to have the older stuff. But anyway, but with many of the indigenous stories, God actually did create the man first, even in their stories. And of course, he did. He was a god, not a goddess. I got some picture here. What's that one? There we go. An illustration of God making man, and he's even got fingernails there, which is quite funny. But most of the stories, when man came first, they talk of man's destructive habit on earth, such as bringing down sacred trees, killing animals, doing all this stuff for no reason. That comes up in the indigenous stories big time. So the gods, it's said in relation to this, the man was going mad and destroying everything. So the gods created the first woman to calm the man down. That appears in some of the stories. And by doing so, showing him more loving and balanced ways, and taught him manners too. Yes, teaching manners actually comes up in quite a few, even in indigenous stories. So there we go. So for men west of Babylon, at least, especially white-skinned men, of course, Lilith came along, and she has haunted the imagination of writers, artists, and poets during at least 4,000 years, even though religions have tried to banish memories of her. And of course, let's get some Lilith up here. It's very difficult to get decent artist impressions of Lilith. I tell you, it's funny. They're quite horrific, some of them. They're like from sci-fi films. Anyway, Lilith tried to convert man's mind into, the church. Rather than the fanciful stories of Lilith, they tried to actually convert her image from this. Being more like an ashling, I would say. Religions tried to convert her into being something like this. They demonized her. And there is an old Christian belief that Lilith was actually Adam's wife and not Eve. But Lilith left him, and she left Eden due to Adam refusing to accept her as an equal. Adam, she said, was too much, demanding to be superior. And apparently there's some Babylonian texts describing Lilith as actually refusing to ever be under Adam and be submissive to him. Anyway, let's go to the Hindus as an example, because within Hindu mythology, we have Brahma. Let's see if I can bring Brahma up. There he is, an illustration of Brahma, along with Shiva and Vishnu. There we go. I said that he created the universe. And a man named Swayambhu Manu, anyway, Manu for short, that translates out as self-infested man. And there was a woman there was Shatarupa. Those of you into Hindu will probably correct me on that as well. But the Shatarupa, she translates out as she of the 100 beautiful forms. But after Brahma created Shatarupa and saw her beauty that he had created, he suddenly wanted her for himself. But as Brahma stared at her, Shatarupa tried to dodge his stare, but each time Shatarupa jumped, Brahma would sprout another head and stare at her. And Brahma sprouted many heads. I think I've got Brahma of the heads here. There we go. There's him busily sprouting heads there. And when Shiva saw this, she sympathized with Shatarupa, and then merged. Shiva merged with his goddess wife, Parvati, and they formed a half woman, half man god. I think I've got that here, and known as the help me out, those who are into the Hindu, the Arden, I can't pronounce it. Arden Arashivra. I think that's it. Arden Arashivra. That's it. But in this form, Shiva was able to teach Brahma that males and females are the same. So bring that back as a revision. Yes, we do have the man on the left there. It's amazing how in Hindu, the men are often blue, aren't they? The blue skin. I suppose there's some women as well. But I could probably get some very good education from Hindu enthusiasts amongst you. And the reason this was shown is because the souls of male and female are exactly the same, but of course, souls don't have genders. It's only the material genders that look different, and that's difference with the outer bodies due to different bodily parts, of course. So with many of these old creation stories, there's a very early setting of gender roles. And I'll never understand the concept of man on earth first, though, because as I pointed out towards the beginning, it does seem with the gender roles that the duties and obligation of man began and carried on as being the hunter, the homemaker, shelter maker, and the protector of shelter, while the women, they were the home keepers, also the gardeners, foragers, nurses, and of course the bearer of children. But and I was, from how I kind of read ancient texts on settled farming, especially with the genetic creating of cereals, starting with barley and oats, which were amongst the first, and along came rye and later wheat. That seemed to be very much, the farming was very much in the woman's domain. But with the settled farming, obviously the men were out hunting less. So because they were doing less hunting, that's how I think they got to take over more of the farming. But within Norse mythology, there's another couple that's very interesting. Asker and Embla, they were the first male and female in the Norse mythology eyes. And I think I've got a picture of them here. I love this one because it was said that they were created by a bunch of gods led by Odin, and they were actually created as man and woman from two tree trunks that washed up onto the beach from the sea and washed up onto the land on the beach. So Odin and the gods came along and converted those tree trunks from the sea into the first man and woman. I love that story. It's great imagery from that. But it's interesting. Askra translates to us as the ash tree, and Embla actually translates as the water pot. And what this reminds me of, and I've spoken this before on these live shows, is the vision of the tree by the underworld spring well. I don't have any photos of that, but this is the nearest. I think this is fascinating. One of the very few wells that's actually fed by water coming out of the tree. I think that's that's the best I can get to you, the vision of a tree by an underworld spring well. And in that one, I would regard the tree as being very much of the masculine, because it's reaching up to the skies, reaching up as far as it can towards the sun. But there you have the water from the underground that actually came underground up into the tree, back down again into a ball. And so there we have the female feminine underworld spring well. So with that combination, it was just as essential for the promotion of life and well-being as the other. So these gods, they gifted Asker and Embla with spirit, with breath, with inspiration and ecstasy. That's what comes out in the tales I've heard of, the Norse tales anyway. So there they go, born with spirit, breath, inspiration and ecstasy. And with that, they could become father and mother of an entire human species. So they were the first. And some of you have come in from more. I love all this YouTube. I should promote on myself on YouTube a bit more. Challenge, Brian. Thanks for being. And Gary's here. Gary Brannigan, who's not camping out today. Yes, everybody on this wild evening. Thanks for joining us, Gary. Fabulous. And a few people who are camping in tonight are watching, which is lovely. Deborah, lovely to have you. Agreed. Light and dark. That's the way to go. That's from an early comment. Let's say light and dark instead of good and evil. And Tina Rock saying hello there. Lovely that you're on board as well, Tina. Thank you very much. And now I think that's enough. It's an introduction where the women come from. So I'm going to go on to the next echo is, where do the fairies come from? Covered the women, and the two are interlinked, but this time this echo. I've largely taken this from text by David Halpin, which you might well be familiar with. He has a very exceptional, informative blog. It's on Facebook, Circle Stories. If you're on Facebook, look it up. Absolutely fabulous content. I'm surprised he just he puts so much on Facebook. He does do lectures and books elsewhere, but certainly look it up. I think David Halpin is wonderful. He's a little bit stern sometimes, so I just love the content and what he shares as well. This is great. So there's a lot of my stuff in with this, but I have used David's stuff as well. So now, just to continue this, thinking about the Norse asker that translated to us as ash, the ash tree, and embla, really translates as water pot, even though in the North, she was still created out of the tree trunk on the shore. But yeah, I believe more connected with water. It makes more sense to me to have the male imagery as the ash tree and a pool and a pot as embla as well. So this follows very close to my own belief of how the first woman was born. So we often automatically think, when we think of womb, we might think of a physical organ being a womb, but think, what physical is that? What organ is that? It's the uterus. Uterus is the organ, the physical organ, of course. But to me, we should never escape the idea of the womb being sacred water. This is, that's a lovely contemporary sort of imagery of that. Someone did a beautiful job with their paintbrushes or scalpels, whatever they use. But that's the best imagery I could get up. The idea of the womb being sacred water, a lot of energy and movement in that one. And then miraculously, within that water, the minerals are gathered up together. Minerals are the earth that's in the water, that's been chelated into the water. And there we go. It's everything comes together to construct living temples, which includes ourselves, for carrying life that has to be born and do whatever we do when we are born, contributing to this earth. But to me, this all makes sense. For the sea or any water body to be the original womb, the first womb that gives birth to the first woman. There's a baby girl. I don't know where that's from, but I think that's a lovely illustration of that. But even then, I still there's a question that hangs with me: is what was the male energy that caused the conception and the eventual birth of a woman? A woman that lives in a human body. What was the male? Where did the masculine come from that? So we also have the reverence of Mary and the Christian faith. Mary, whose name was developed from myrrh, which we kind of understand as being the sea or any flow of water. But in island folklore, it mainly refers, this water flow to me, it mainly refers to the she. That's nice. That's just and in the Oriental folklore, that's a lotus. That's not the she, but to me, it's related. To me, the flow of life is through the she, and in the Oriental folklore, they talk about the chi, and both to me, the she and the chi. I really am getting sorry about my tongue tying. And I'm probably excited about this subject, is what it is. So to me, the flow of life goes through the she or the chi, depending which side of the planet you're on by the looks of it. And both of these include the flow of water. And even, there we are, the Oriental dragons. They're water creatures, and they're really incredible honoring of the dragons in the East, in the China and the Indochina areas, and they're not flamethrowers, they're water creatures and flow of life. And today, maybe the word fairies is used more than she, and that's really why I want to talk on this. I think on the next picture, I'm going to change the backcloth because something more colourful. But the fairy word, it does seem to have come into Ireland through quite late, actually. I think it came in through the Normans, really, because fairy is an old word that does come from old French language, not the Latin French or the Greek. the connection. There are people have tried. Linguistic people have tried to make the connection of fairy to Latin and Greek, but I think their philosophy on this, on language, is pretty weak. So I suspect the fairy word came into early France, as a Gaulish origin. And of course, if it's Gaulish origin, that can make it go back to Germanic and even Slavic origins, even Romania for the person that was here. But the old French fairy words, let's get a picture up. I need a picture up anyway, because I'm going to change my background. The French fairy word, a lot of people think of fairies here as little beings with wings. But in the old French word, it was really talking about enchantment. And I want to change my background here, so give me a second on that, and I'll come back to you. There we go. I think I'll have that one instead, though. Right. So where we have the fairy as a source of inspiration, and especially inspiration for our prophetic poetry. And with Ireland now, and when people tell of versions of the Tuatha De Danann, that's often when people start thinking of fairies. They describe the Danann as a partial or complete fairy race. And the stories tell of how they were driven underground into the other world. And most people in Ireland at least know a story of that. Oops, and something has happened, one of the computers, but we'll keep going. And it said that they were driven under the ground and they became the good people. And to translate what good people means, I'll leave you to do that at your own leisure. But within Irish mythological texts from medieval scribes, there are references to the Ishi. And they were all, Ishi were already present. Let's see if we can get an Ishi pro. There they are. I hope that's clear enough. But these were already present in the mountains, the hills, the fairy hills as we know them, like what we have around here, Knocknashee, Knocknarea, of course. We have Cornashiga by Caish, and was in trying to think of Knocknashini, up on the border there in Fermanagh. And there also we regard the Ishi as being present around Spring Wells, what we call the Holy Wells now. But they were around a long time before the Tuatha De Danann entered into the storyline here and entered into the realm. So how long has that been? Now, adding intrigue to our wonder of such mysteries is any question we may have about how long human beings have been in Ireland, because the way I think as long as there's been human beings, and really before that, as long as there's been life here, even dinosaurs, there's always been a she. But the standard story is that I've heard ever since I was a child was the humans and the she have been around for 10,000 years, and those that did arrive on this island that became Ireland were all new arrivals that arrived here after the last serious ice age. One of the examples of people that came from what's now the Sahara, which apparently at that time was a tropical rainforest like the Amazon, but there was a whole change in climate, blah, blah, blah. And people started coming up into, as the ice age was receding, people were moving into the areas where there was new fertile land after the ice had melted. But recent research has indicated that humans were on this island before 33,000 years ago. Now, that's pretty complicated as well, because you go to archaeologists, and a lot of archaeologists will say 33,000 years ago, this wasn't even an island. It wasn't even an island 10,000 years ago. Some will say it was a peninsula off of Europe. They were still connected. Because of that time, the North Sea didn't really existed. There were ancient people living there. The English Channel was a mere river. Things like that. Even the Irish Sea is said to have been a river. Anyway, but why 33,000? Why are they coming up with the 33,000 years now rather than rounded up 30,000 years? I don't know. I would have Why the extra 3,000 years? Anyway, there's absolutely no chance of evidence of any beliefs of what any human form was around about that time, or even what we now call spiritual paths. What do they lead? What do they follow? What was their guidance? What was their spiritual guidance? Now, this is actually documented. The archaeologists looking at African and Australian art, this kind of thing. 33. This art, I think, is up to 30,000 years ago. This is in North Africa somewhere. I don't know the exact location, but it's typical of the art they were picking up. And some of this art, it seems to present depictions of otherworldly forms as well, such as ancestors. And I didn't have time to find more, but I have seen various engravings that showed people in possible rituals of some form. So I'm sure that through the entire human being existence, ancient people were aware of the wider consciousness states that we can actually achieve. And it would have perhaps been easier for them because they would have had less in their lives to distract them from achieving that awareness. So I'm sure ancient people relied much more on the consciousness as their guide and their guidance to ensure successful hunting and overall good health, and to even be aware of the seasons. Our question I've always held for a long time, and I still return to, is how our consciousness relates to what we call spirit, or she, and the enchanting fairies, maybe the little creatures with the wings as well. We may even hold reverence for our ancestors as our guides. A lot of people do that. It's very strong in sort of rural Middle East, where they're kind of sidebarring themselves from the Islamic faith. They have a lot of similar belief and connection to folklore that's perhaps more intimate and more visual than the equivalent that's arrived in Ireland. And one of the things is you take the Kurds, Kurdistan area, the Kurdish race. They really believe strongly in their ancestors living in trees. So they have a much more precious approach to trees than perhaps even in ancient Ireland here. Or people expect to see their ancestors at the holy wells as well sometimes. And the idea is believing our ancestors, and this makes sense to me, they're now part of the spirit, the she, the fairy realm. Right, I'll take a break to read your comments on that. Sheba Aaron, the Sleven Iron, the Iron Mountain, Tina Rock, which is by there. What's that in reference to from what I was saying, Tina? If you're going to explain that a little bit more, that would be great. Probably regarding it as a fairy hill, certainly as a holy well hill, because the amount of iron that comes out into some of that holy well water is funny. There's one at Hughes Well I take people to, and I thought it's such clean water, and I say to people, have a taste of that. That's really clean water. And it's quite a shock to them because for most people it tastes like rusty nails. If anybody's ever drunk rusty nails or tried to chew on a rusty nail. But there was one person I talked not so long ago who said, it's the best water I've tasted in my life. It probably is if they've got really bad muck coming out of their taps, out of their faucets. Anyway, let's get on with another person, Neil Rushton. Do I have a picture? I think I have a picture of Neil Rushton, someone you may be familiar with. He's got a very interesting blog around his book. That's his book, Dead But Dreaming. And during one blog post, he describes camping next to the well-known ancient West Kennet Barrow near Avery. If any of you have been there it is. It doesn't exactly show the entrance, but it's very long. The entrance is to the left of that. You can tell if you look at that white bit where people have trodden quite a bit. And Neil describes an experience. That's not a very good photo, but it's appropriate from what I'm about to say. And he describes an experience from meditation within the end of that barrow. So he went right to the end, and it's quite long. And he described it. It was at the end and getting comfortable, but it took him 20 minutes to get into a real meditation state, because Neil's quite into that. And at that point, as he was going into the meditation state, he was surrounded by a low-level buzz. And to him, it's familiar. He does this at various locations, especially inside megaliths, and he's always hearing this hum. And he was in the meditation state that it took him 20 minutes to get into. And he looked at the entrance, and then he describes what he says was an approaching fairy. And his description was this fairy was 2 feet tall, and it came towards him up and then stopped a few feet away and stopped in that space. I don't know how he measured it, but he thinks it was about 10 seconds. And then it just quickly went to in a flash, went back to the entrance and vanished through the light of the entrance. Now, Neil does admit that what he saw looked very much like a fairy illustration in a book, and I'm going to show you some of these. These illustrations are from a book from 1978. It's called Fairies, and it was produced by Brian Froud and Alan Lee. I'll show you. So his imagery he thinks was based around these. There we go. There's one there. Or this character, and even this one. That I must admit, sometimes my cat Squeak gives that expression as well. So I'll show you them again. So that's Fairies by Brian Froud and Alan Lee. I don't have a copy of that. Came out in 1978. Anyway, Neil does ask. He did question that was his visual experience of this fairy coming towards him, was it actually pre-coded into his mind as expectations that what a fairy is going to look like? Or was it really a vision that was tuned into his consciousness so he could recognize it? I've had a similar experience myself, and if you've got a copy of my Bathing in the Phase Breath book, Bolanashiga, I introduced an experience that was similar in the introduction there. But within that experience, it didn't happen from meditation. I wasn't going into a 20-minute meditation. It was actually enforced on me from an out-of-body experience while I was having a stroke. But I was very aware of the imagery being formed. And it was forming according to my expectations. And it's funny, I was actually being aware of this as it was forming. Yeah, this is for my own recognition. And if it was something from my own recognition, then I immediately trusted it. So that experience questioned of that figure that came. It was actually a figure coming out of water, believe it or not, from what I was telling you, the origin of women. But that experience had a voice, and it was questioning me and almost commanding me to stop following megalithic sites and ley lines, which I was pretty addicted at following and researching and finding, but instead spend the rest of my life focused on water and trees, which I was focused on, but put a heavier focus on that. That's what came up with this out-of-body experience of this so-called she person. And the reason for it is because the water and the trees were there long before the megaliths and ley lines, and I suppose in the same breath of what I was talking about, that the Fae, or what we call the fairies, was around a very long time, very, very long time before the Tuatha came along. And I did have 2 other similar experiences, not really written about them. One of them was in my teens. I was actually in a gymnastics display, which is hard to believe when you see me now. But in that gymnastics display where I was trying to do a double somersault, I think I did 2.5 somersaults, and it knocked me out. And when I crashed to the ground, and in that one, in that sort of out of body, a small girl visited me, and that small girl was wearing a white dress, and comforted me and said I would heal fast, but she would always be present to guide me through my life. And then I had another happening. It happened in the 20s. I had an accident where I fell down a hole in a field. And in that one, a red-headed, tall, sincere-looking, much older woman, not the girl, very sincere. And the amusing thing was, again, had a voice and said she was from Australia. And to prove that she was from Australia, she said she was at my presence to prove that folklore from consciousness is not local, but it's of all the earth, it's fairly universal. And I should make it my life's work to follow folklore in such a way. So that was it. So, like with Neil, he experienced no fear when this image came to him. I didn't feel fear. Like him, I felt joy because what happened was, in these out of body experiences, some of the questions that you hold and doubts in your life, suddenly it becomes clear and it makes sense. And the biggest intimacy was this sense of deep connection and belonging. And with all these out of body experiences, you suddenly experience extreme trust. And if you can experience that trust, then the whole belonging connection, you realize, that you found it, and that's the way it is. So for many of us, we may imagine and vision fairies as images that reside beneath the earth, especially within caves or subterranean tunnels. And some of these megalithic sites are entrances to these tunnels and caves too. Owenagot Cave in Rathcrowan is certainly a popular example of this. There we go. That's inside the cave. And if a lot of people, I took that one myself when we was going down once. It just goes down and down, and that roof gets higher and higher. It's quite phenomenal. Great experience to go down there. And I want to go. A lot of people translate that out as Cave of the Cats. And now when you visit, there's the cat, or one of the cats anyway. So that's I want to go County Roscommon, and that's a winter shot. But you might be able to recognize that entrance is actually between the roots of a hawthorn tree. Beautiful if you can go there in middle of May and you enter that when the hawthorn's in blossom. That's quite an outstanding experience in itself. And David Halpin, he suggests that caves, whether natural or man-made, are also places where our sensory boundaries become much wider, and within these sort of cabins, we can find it easier to disconnect from the physical world. So to me, and with my experiences that I shared with you, personal experiences, I've had travelers who have visited such places, caves, megaliths, and they agree. Once they enter these places, though some people have a fear of it, the fear of the claustrophobia, but those that enter, they suddenly aware that they've got a sense of trust when they're in such sites. And when you've got that trust, as I've just explained, it opens up your mind, opens up your connection. You really flow into that consciousness that you suddenly feel is connecting with the whole earth, all life on earth. And some people are bold enough to say that you're connecting with the universe. So despite being these tunnels and caves being dark and cold and damp, whether it's natural or in a megalithic passage, it can seem to bring about trust. We suddenly have that sense of trust in consciousness. And a lot of people, I find it's a bit unfortunate because I get such a thing from heritage trees, but a lot of people prefer the cavern to the heritage trees. And for me, even more powerful than the heritage trees is being by a natural spring well. It hasn't been dressed up too much. And where, like I showed in an earlier picture, if you've got that spring well and you buy a heritage tree at the same time, a lovely example is if you go to what they now call the King's Well near Caish, there you've got this incredible bubbling, fresh bubbling water all year round by this amazing heritage ash tree. So with perhaps the trust in caves and the underworld, that's when we may seem to feel we make a very clear association with the fairies, with the she, with the entities that are living beneath the earth. And that opens our perception to various states of consciousness that we may not allow ourselves to do and allow to happen elsewhere. If you go back on previous Nature Echoes, I talked about the cauldrons of Posey, which is very connected to this. If you have the visions of the cauldrons and work with that as well, it can open up a lot of perception as well. Bring the two together, you go to places that you trust and you relate to cauldrons of Posey. It's amazing the inspiration that comes out and the poems you'll come out with, the songs and the art and so forth. So for many centuries, and especially from the mid-19th century when the Celtic Romance times evolved about in parallel to the Industrial Revolution, we may have believed that fairies have come to us from beneath the earth. But when the science fiction genre started in the 50s, which was really hilarious, go on YouTube and look for 1950s science fiction. It's really crazy stuff. But when it really took off in books, in comics, cartoons, and filmmaking. Lots of B movies were these science fiction things with their advanced Bakelite dials and that type of stuff, where they would go millions of light years away and land on a planet, and everybody still speaks Shakespearean English. But well, I think during the 1950s, during that science fiction, fairies were not only seen as coming from the ground, they started to speculate that these fairies, these little people, came to us through holes, conduits, worms, all these things in space from, or even completely from another dimension. And more recently, parallel universes. One of my favorite, I think a lot of you do, is the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. One of the little excerpts from that I love is where there was an invasion from thousands of light years away. There was invasion coming towards Earth, and they were going to conquer the Earth, only to be near landing and swallowed up by a small dog. So that's, that sort of questions our concepts of size. So it's quite unusual for me to use the word fairy. I've used it a lot in this Nature Echoes, much more than I've used the word she, which I normally do with any article, with any broadcast. But I suppose I've taken what may be a more popular route this time, because fairy was in this title. It was in my title for this session too. Anyway, but as a recap, I'm thinking the first women born, I think I've got the picture up here, and that's the cat. I think that's a pretty picture. So to recap, thinking the first women born from water were born from the sea. So what was the masculine entity that allowed this conception to take place? That started the conception that brought about water and dust coming together in order to create a temple body, such as our human body, to carry spirit, connection to consciousness. And as I believe in the she itself, that entity even allows our temple body to connect with all else. But I also love the creation stories of the earth being all water. There's various ones. I'm not going to go into a full one now, but these stories, they more or less tell that the whole earth was water. There was no land, but there were creatures in the water. So they've been born and created, and they started pulling up mud, making it into a pile. And as it went above the surface of the water, there was the sun, drying out the clay or whatever it is they were bringing up. And the more they did this, the more this mountain that they were making and drying was becoming land. And that's how the land on earth was created. So there's a few creation stories. I can't think of the tribes I learned those from, but I've heard those from a few North American tribes. And then when you got the land, what happens is the water rises from the land. It creates clouds. Those clouds fall into the swallow holes on the hills and the mountains. And that water, it flows deep underground. It collects and chelates minerals as it travels. And then that water comes back up through the surface, either as lochs, Loch Arrow we've got here in County Sligo, even Loch Lou up on the Ushnick, Hill of Ushnick. There's various hills that form these lochs. So you can get these big lochs. And I love the stories of how they relate to the Sheen and the Gig, but that's another one. But what we may be more familiar with is water come up through the surface, going through the sacred springs that we call the holy wells, and it's at these water wells and springs that we may tell stories about the entities of the she, the fairies, and the healing, and certainly from the rivers that come from these wells. The stories of Shannon and Bowen, they're two of the most famous ones that really go from a little girl into a goddess, into a fairy story, really. And it's through this sort of sense of this water spouting up, and through visions maybe that we have in the world, so it enables me anyway, to sort of bring that trust back and make conscious connections. So the Tour de Danann, as I say, I think they were much later. To me, I find their tales are quite egotistical. A lot of the Tour de Danann stories, I think, are very much about egotistical heroes. And of course, when the scribes were writing all about this, they were employed by the chieftains, they were employed by the abbots. They really wanted stories of their own legacy that would be passed on, and so that they could continue a legacy of being heroes, of being commanders, of being chieftains. I think that's how that one came about myself. So the Tour de Danann were very much later, and I find that, but even with the Tour de Danann, the stories there, men were off hunting and doing the Tour de Danann stuff. And the women, they actually seemed to create the land for farming, and they looked after the farms as well. So with the Tour de Danann, follow that, we come around to the Milesian stories. And to me, that's simply a vision of the Tour de Danann, Balkan to Baltic-like culture, that as you listen to past stuff that I've written, that connection to a lot of the Tour de Danann tales that are here. So to me, I interpret the Milesians as being a visionary thing that is describing the coming of the foundation of the Gaelic culture, which really overtook everything that the Tour de Danann seemed to stand for. But it is told that the Tour de Danann underground, they were the I'm trying to think of the word now. Dinshi, weren't they? The Dinshi. That's what the Tour de Danann would describe that, and that's my last picture, I think, of the Dinshi there. There's a sort of an example of them there. However we view the She, though, however we view fairies, we can at least hold on to and play with the idea that these entities emerged as essential visions for us from a deeper part of our consciousness. And that's, as I keep repeating, to me, it's worth holding on to that rather than put stuff into an AI server. Don't lose your consciousness. As David Halpin, I think, was saying, that the She or the fairies are neither physical nor totally invisible, but they always dare us, whatever way they're present, they always dare us to attempt us to relate to them in some way. And that brings us forward into the higher understanding of ourselves and even our living destiny and what we should be doing, our place and the deeds that we should be doing whilst we're within our body on our time on Earth. And as I keep repeating, look at your astrology charts, look at the South Node, North Node. That's a nice sort of clue of the map we live. So after all that blabbing, let's have a look at comments. And there's Josie Posey. When it comes to fairy stuff, Josie Posey would expand this a lot more than I would. And I think the first thing she would say is go meet Pat Noon on his fairy field. And you'll get a lot of expansion from what I've been talking about today. There's a few other people coming here as well. Breezy Kelly's here. Good evening over the half door with Breezy Kelly. Unfortunately, I can't stay in and out, listen to the replay. And I'm so pleased you came in to say hello. Thanks, Breezy. Thank you. Runa's got some interesting comments, I think. Here we go. Would you recommend the work called The Secret Commonwealth of Elves, Fauns and Fairies? It's not something I would dash to, but I wouldn't knock it because I don't know anything about it. So it's a great recommendation. I'm sure people watching this now or later, they will look that up and look at the synopsis and see if it's something for them. And that's what I'll be doing too. So thank you for making that recommendation. Great. And Tina Rock was saying there, we've had that. I think we've got you all the comments so far, which is fabulous. I got one more echo. I know I've been going on a long time. It's been getting longer and longer again with this. But it's really about Mancorn McGowan. I think I have a picture of him here. There he is. No, that's his book. There's a picture of him there in the trees. That was taken a couple of years ago when he actually had a wonderful series of that. And now I'm losing a computer. Come back again. Yes, it's come back. Thank goodness for that. So it was the one I saw photos from. So Mancorn, he's released another folklore book, and it's this one. And there we go, Wolfman and Waterhounds. And apparently, I haven't got a copy yet. I'm a bit late. I usually can't wait to get his stuff off the press, but the pennies were a bit short, so I'll get this in a week or two's time. But apparently, whoops, I've got my definitely something. Yeah, I use 3 computers on this, and one of the computers has decided to die on me. Anyway, the Wolfmen and Hounds. Yeah, there was a quote. It's a shame they died because I had a quote lined up from him, and and that's what it was. I was just fiddling to get the quote up, and then the computer said, "No, you're not going to read that out." So give me a chance. I can probably find it on the phone anyway. Give me a moment on that. Get back on the phone as well, because it'll take me ages. I'm not even going to bother to fire up this computer. It'll take me ages to get back to it. It'll be quicker on the phone, I think. It should be. Here we go. There we go. We're almost on to it. And I'll give you a quote that Mencken said, because he had an interview with the Irish Times, which has caused quite a bit of controversy, because some of the points he made really kind of upset some of the folklore, what's the word? Compliance for folklore compliance people. But there's a lot of people actually rave and say, "Thank goodness someone's talking a bit of sense." So I'm going to try and get up his pass from. What I'm pulling up is the actual interview, because there was something he said on that which I thought was quite remarkable. I'm almost there. I'll give you just got. Oh, it's a different thing on the. It's very different. Its presentation on. So anyway, I'm almost on it. I think I've got it. It's the small print on the phone, which I'm having a problem with now. So yeah, Wolfmen and Hounds. I got, after all that, now I've got the cat Squeak, who's going to visit you in a moment, I think. Squeak wants food. Anyway, within this interview with Roshan Engel in the Irish Times, Mancorn explained that he has 2 agendas with his work. And the first is to connect people deeper to the potency of the land, because he says, "I believe that people who are alienated from the land, they just can't survive. The only way humans have managed to survive is by being in tune with it and being connected with their surroundings. If we break that bond, we're not going to survive very long." And his other ambition is to remind people of, here comes Squeak. If you see a cat run across me, it's Squeak. So his other ambition is to remind people of the energy, to connect them to their body, their mind, and the land. And for most of our existence, we have, and as the examples are given this afternoon or evening, is that we have always believed in some form of animism, that every rock, every flower, every branch, and rainbow even, has within it a vibrating spirit of energy of God or good, or some kind of all-powerful entity that is beyond and above, that's much more than human. The spirit within ourselves and the spirit within all things makes our life so much more enjoyable and rich and magical. In some ways, I should have just read this out and ignored my entire presentation this evening anyway. But this also ensures that we treat other, if we can follow this, it ensures that we treat each other and our environment with a lot more love and respect and care. So I think we're all with you there, Mancorn. It actually reads like my own intents that I tried to share through Nature Folklore and Nature Echoes. So let's see if you're saying any more about that. I think that Josie is the last. Oh, here we go. Somewhere here. Very important question. Since you mentioned the cauldron and the posy, would you say as an idea that the verses of Ammagin's song correspond with one or more? I think you'd have to, for me to answer that, look back on my past Nature Echoes, I think I did, on the cauldron's posy. I don't think I put it as a written article, where I had an whole Nature Echoes about that. I think the Ammagin, I mean, the way it's recorded, the cauldron and posy, the people refer to a 16th century document. That 16th century document claims it is a reprint of an 11th century scribe document, which nobody's ever seen. And the legend goes on to say that that was actually a copy or an improvement on the 7th century, which was the oral writing down of Ammagin. Now, the one thing that doesn't exist is the recording of Ammagin himself. So I think I've already said, even in this session, that I tend to believe the Milesians were very much a visionary story to help us to vision the oncoming of what became the Gaelic culture, which has been kind of wiped out since the 16th century onwards. So it's not surprising that the cauldrons of posy came out, a bit like what happened with the mid-19th century Celtic romance. All this industrial revolution was coming along. Please, 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 we don't want to lose our connection to that folklore and the stories we had. So really a whole different interpretation, because what was happening and what was new during the Industrial Revolution is, in order to be part of the Industrial Revolution, people had to learn to read and write. There weren't many people reading and writing before that time. 16th century, it was quite minimal who could read and write, so they had to rely on the bards, the poets, on the information they got there. And really, those people at that time, the inspired poets, Shanachis, the Shannons, speaking of Shannas, the Imbas, any of that, don't lose that. It was all about don't lose that. And I think the cauldrons of posy is very much an imagery of please don't lose that imagination, because as you're aware, bottom one, you're born with it full of nourishment. Your middle one that's around your chest and it's sort of hovering. Are you going to fill it or are you going to empty it? Because if you can get it turned over, then that whole wisdom and knowledge and your connection with consciousness, which I've been talking about, fills it up and you become all complete. And it's very, to me, it's very much ideal for Ireland, for Éire, because out in the Orient, they've got the 7 chakras. It's suited for here because it's been whittled down to 3, and it's much more easier to manage visionary and to be part of that. So anyway, that's another session. I'm almost repeating the last one, and I've gone way over time as it is. Is there anything else? Thanks, Runa's thanked me for waffling there. Thank you very much, Runa, for even asking that. That was a lovely question anyway. I'm glad you asked that one. So what else have I got? Thanks for watching. Wonderful. And don't forget that if you enjoy what you're hearing here, if I go through that presentation again, and this is very me taking a chance because I've never done it this way. If you go to my Nature Folklore, there we go, naturefolklore.com, you'll come up with that. If you click on the publications, you got all the stuff you get here, read the stuff I've got on Substack. If you go below this, I'll go a bit below and I'll show you. I actually have the various series. There you see the various series that I've written up. You can read the series, and but to generally read, you click the read one as well. It comes up. And if you follow something like this, that was the last one I put up. I've subscribed because I'm the writer. You'll see a subscribe button. You can go through that and you'll get at least 40 articles like this. This is an ongoing series. I'm late with the next one, but I try to get them up on Sundays as well. It's going to be a few more parts to this one. But if you go through a bit further, go to the course, the Owen Comments prompts course there. As you see, subscribe €5 a month or €30 a year. click that and follow the instructions, and that would help me along a lot. You get that 20 modules a year I'm putting into that, as well as getting the articles and as well as getting invited to meetups. So that's what helps to fund this broadcast, actually. So if you can help out on that. So I assume that came through to you. No, it didn't, did it? It didn't come through, did it? Oh no! Right, I'll try. You're probably thinking, what's he on about? What's he on about there? I'll try again. I'll rapidly through that and see if you can memorize what I said before. As I said, it was the first time I done this. So there we go. And that's what I'm doing now. The next publications, go through the read. There's the sets of the publications. Go there and you'll find there's a subscribe button. If you go to the course, and this is the one that helps me, 5 years a month, 30 a year. And anyway, I've been through that as an encore because I was going through a bit of tech with this broadcasting that I haven't used for a long time, so I didn't know what I was doing. So anyway, what we got else? I think that's pretty much it, isn't it? Explaining that. So please subscribe if you haven't, and they help me out if you can go on to the prompts course, which actually includes some of the stuff I taught below. It's revolving, so you can join anytime. But coming up next Sunday Nature Echoes, I'm not sure yet. So if something comes up in the week, I see a news item, so I've got to echo this, got to echo that. So I'll be doing that as well. So thank you for staying with me much longer than usual again. I'm going to try and get this down to half an hour again. But thank you for watching this. And if you're watching the action replay, I do keep an eye on your comments and I do answer them. What I will do whenever I find time, it won't happen until next year, is I'll take some of these editions that are over an hour and I'll take little chunks out of them. And so you can go through the little more shorter videos. That'll be great. So all it leaves me to do is enjoy a safe week full of wonder, the inspirations and enchantments, especially with the Fae or the She, or in the presence of the woods and the mysteries of nature and by the water. So until next Wednesday, please join me then next Wednesday. Until then, wishing you an absolutely fabulous week. And if I can just get this to behave, everything's getting stuck and sticky now. It's just as well I'm saying bye-bye. So see you next Wednesday, I hope, with the next Nature Echoes, and we'll see what the echoes are in. So thank you very much. Bye. Bye.